And the question is, I hear coaches use the word agency a lot. What is agency?
Mm, mm, mm. So the word agency comes from a Latin word agere, which means to do or to act. We get the word act from agency. So agency essentially is the ability for someone to act or take action.
And how does that fit in kind of learning and being in coaching?
Right. So, okay, so we live on a dead end street, but there's not really great signage. And every now and then, cars will come through, thinking it's a road, but it's not. It's more like just a driveway. And there's another house that lives on the other side. So it looks like the road continues past our house, but it really doesn't. So they do, they turn around in our neighbor's driveway and they go back out. Fine, right? But when you have little ones, this is a terrifying proposition because cars just zoom by and they don't know. So, putting this into a coaching, if we create the metaphor for coaching, there's this idea that okay, so we are victims of this process. There's not much we can do. We talk about putting up speed bumps, but the neighbors don't want to. We're trying to do these things, and we ask ourselves, okay, so where's our agency? Where is our ability to what can we control? And well, what we can control is we can put up gates, which we did. We put up a gate in the front, gate in the back, another gate in the back. So now we have a 2-gate system. It feels like we have a small mini fortress of like being containment apparatus. And so we have these apparatus set up. What it does though is so that's a demonstration of agency. That's a demonstration of what are the actions that I can take to make this thing better. Right. So then the question is, well, how does that affect our being? So now when someone zooms past our house, we don't have that same, oh my goodness, where are all the beings reaction? It's okay. Thank goodness we have the gates. Thank goodness we have this thing set up. And then once that happens, it really does affect your mental emotional space. The beingness of it shifts away from disempowered, anxious parent to empowered, calmer person. And so when you're asking yourself, when a client really steps up into agency, when they look at their agency, what we do affects who we are, and who we are affects what we do. It's all connected. And what's one of the great things about hope theory is that it helps us look at those two things. It helps us look at both of those things and ask ourselves the question, what are the action steps that need to be taken so I can step into my empowered self? And then my empowered being self, what are those action steps that can, what are the action steps that need to be taken from that perspective? It goes both ways. It's useful to look at both of these things separately and then put them back together. The learning that comes from that's you ask yourself the question, so what did we learn from that situation and how can we apply it in other places? That's a really helpful guideline to learning and how it fits into all of this stuff.
And it seems so obvious to me now because I'm in the coaching world and am a coach and had coaching. Yeah, I think about when I first discovered that I have my own agency. I mean, I think being brought up or cultural aspects or just, as I said, sometimes it feels so obvious now, but just thinking that things were fixed or that I couldn't get to choose or I didn't really control things. And I think about, and I think we've talked about this before, education system or
Right.
schools or, this thought around a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. How does agency thinking support that view?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we're speaking to, especially cultural and societal, I don't know what the term structures. When you start looking at structural racism and bias and that, and something that Moise and I fall back to when necessary is this idea of brushing off negativity or messed upness, and not allowing it to affect the rest of the day. Being like, you know what, they win if we have to talk about this a lot or process. I mean, there's some of that goes on, but if you have to process that and it takes over the day or it takes over even an hour, it's finding ways to I guess process sufficiently and effectively, and then just move on and not put ourselves in those positions. So I think what does get developed, and like the benefit of this is, I feel like what gets developed is this idea of anti-fragility, where there gets developed a resourcefulness, a deep sense of like call it like a long sigh, and then you move on with with the rest of the things. Yeah. So I think, it's hard. It's not easy. But if we can get through it, then I think it definitely helps with, builds resilience.
And what about hope theory? So where does agency fit in with hope theory?
Yeah, I mean, agency is, yeah, I mean, it's the doingness of, it's also looking at, it's that interaction between learning and being, right? And then you're also looking at pathways as well. So your agency is your ability to take the pathway. It's your ability to do the things that need to get done. And the pathway is the action steps, the strategies, the structures in place that you have in order to accomplish that, the systems. And thinking about it that way, it's really powerful, because agency can also go into, okay, so what do I need to learn in order to do the things that I need to get done? That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So I think from a coaching standpoint, I love the structure of hope theory. I feel like it fits almost exactly with the structure that like learn, be, do that I used to really lean into as an instructor and as a coach, because it just made sense. And so just backing up just a little bit, whenever you're doing a coaching session and you're working with someone, sometimes coaches will get into habits where they'll ask the same kind of questions, or they'll have like, I don't know, call it like question rut, where, you get used to it. These questions work. You're listening to people, but you have the same kind of questions in the same kind of situations. One of the ways to get out of that, or if you're asking yourself, how can I get to the next level as a coach? Am I asking a question around being, like around my client's character, around my client's, character traits, values, energy, emotion? Or am I asking questions around action steps a lot? Like what's the next step on this? What systems have they tried? What pathways have they chosen? What strategies are they employing? Those are more learning-based questions. And then, those are more doing-based questions. Learning-based questions are more like, what are you learning about yourself? What's working right now in the system, and how can you apply that to other places? So having that structure, learn, be, do, is really helpful thinking to get out of the question, right? As a coach, hope theory, when I found it, felt like this eureka moment, because it feels like they break it out this way, where agency equals being, pathways equals doing, learning in some ways, and then the feedback can be learning. Like, oh my goodness, here it is. Positive psychology provides, and we have a theoretical structure and framework for this kind of coaching, which I now know. I know what our learning philosophy is. Because we get this question sometimes. I know where it comes from. I think it's kind of fun to think about it. And our learning philosophy is teleological.
I like teleological. That word.
It's purpose-based. It's asking, what's the purpose of this? It's not ontological. It's not looking at, the idea of like the being or essence and that kind of stuff, which is cool. But it's not. It's asking ourselves a question. Coach, Train EDU, what we do, I realize what we do is we ask ourselves, how do you want to use this? How do you want to use even negativity? That's not a question that is a courageous question. That is a question that assumes greatness, and a question that assumes that people have a lot of this inner strength and resilience, which isn't always, I mean, you don't always have to be in this space, but to access it, to get to this space, that's really powerful. And so what we do as an organization is teleological. It's asking ourselves, what's the purpose? How can we use this? Yeah.
How can we use this? What's the purpose?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you think that impacts action?
Well, I think people who have a clearly defined purpose take more consistent and take bolder action steps. I know that's from my own life, that when I had clearly defined, once I clearly defined the purpose of what I was trying to do, with, augmenting education, with coaching skills, and then to bring that in, learning what's happening in the executive and wellness worlds too, it clarified a lot. And there's power in clarity. It clarifies mental emotional space. It enables you to act more clearly, more boldly. I'd make phone calls I never would make, talk to superintendents. If you're in the education space, you want to break into a school, talk to the superintendents. They're the ones who, oddly enough, I found have space in their calendars for these kind of conversations, these global conversations, these conversations that can change the whole culture of a school. These are the things that they're interested in. And that's the kind of boldness you get when you have a clear purpose and you're not doing it for your own sake, but you're doing it for the sake of humanity. People feel it. There's a compellingness to it. And then there's also a trust that if you do this consistently, you'll be taken care of too. So it goes hand in hand.
Boldness, clarity, courage. For me, I probably add fulfillment as well.
Right.
Because then when I have that clarity, it's also good for me to check in. Am I aimlessly just adding actions because I've had this pattern that I've attempted to break, around achievement or perfection, or this is what it should be looking like in terms of societal expectations? Or like, what is the purpose for me? Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I keep that top of mind. Borrowed insight. Thanks, John.
Teleological. It was fun to find the word. Like, oh, what is it we do? Oh yeah, that's it. That's the idea.
How did you discover that word? Teleological.
It's Greek. It was cool. Yeah. I was actually looking into, I was like trying to think about it because we get the question every now and then. It's the same word: telephone, telescope, long distance. What's the end in mind? I think I Googled like, what's the end in Greek, and tele came up. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So, it's purpose-based stuff. And there's a deep philosophical tradition in teleology. But try to say a couple words too. The big ones. I don't know. Today's been a weird day with pronunciation of words. What are you going to do?
Thanks, John.
Preposterous. Okay. I was trying to say preposterous earlier today.
Say it again.
Preposterous.
I'm not going to attempt it right now.
Try it.
I've got teleological in my mind. I can't say.
Right? It's a weird one. It's preposterous.
Preposterous. There we go.
Preposterous. Got it.
Okay. So next question, John. I know he's going to probably throw in some other words.